Hello, we are in another random part of the DMV. Doing what she would do. So there's a. So yeah, I was thinking of something I was talking about. Blanking on it. Okay, so quick update on the platonic eat less gambit stuff. Kind of working. You know, the Google Calendar again, it does work. So now we're 2 weeks in, and there is some scientific proof of it working. So, or at least the self-loathing is kind of real. Anyways, what I was thinking about, things to talk about. Yeah, Anacostia. You know, I was talking to someone who's a DC native, and he was like, I was like, anything cool on that side of the river? And he's like, nah. He said, nah, there's not. So there's a TikTok account where the gimmick is, he just goes Google Maps around different cities, and then he just goes like, is it shitty or not? And of course, the gambit is like, yeah, probably is kind of shitty. so here we are. But you know, you see like the apartments over there, right? So you see the intention that they're trying to go for. All right, the apartments right here. So. Very, very strange areas, you know. Strange juxtapositions. But what can you do? Thurgood Marshall. I do like the same handful of civil rights guys getting memorialized. You know, they do deserve it. Anything interesting on this walk? Not really. It's a Frederick Douglass historical site, you know. I am probably well-read enough to where I know something about something, but not so well-read to actually be that substantive. And certainly when you go to someone's historical site, presumably you'd want to be a bit more knowledgeable about that person, but I mean, but it's not the case for me with Mr. Douglas. I forget if he was Uncle Tom's Cabin or not. Look at that vaguely reminiscent San Francisco verticality right there. But fit check once again, milking, gassing the Roma jersey into perpetuity, bro. It's bad. But something, okay, so it's been a while, or I didn't fully rant about like the dating stuff. It's like presumably like what informs like perception of attractiveness. And it's like, well, of course, there's like physical attribute, preference, but there is also presumably some social signal, right? It's like Do you like straight hair? Or do you like a perm? Like there's probably some, right, societal, cultural hand on the scale that affects what you like. And presumably with that, then just like social status also plays a function, right? And so the thinking is, it's like to what degree of like attractiveness is just like you perceiving the other person to be cool and therefore desirable. But desirable not in a physical sense, but also in terms of like the social capital or the attractiveness. And I think some of it, it's kind of like, I'm not sure if it's just me, it shows my shallowness, but it's almost mimetic, where you see, like you're talking to your guy about like, stop saying like so much, I find that a bit annoying, but talking to your friend about like some girl, and he's like, yeah, I find her cute too. That's like, yeah, it's like that person seems more attractive after the fact, therefore. Oh, like that's clearly, so again, maybe that could be just being bad friends to each other, trying to cock block one another. Could also be, as that good old Churdley skit reminds us, but it could also be probably something more mimetic, right? Mimetic, where you see something and therefore you want to propagate it. Dawkins coined the term, but that's the idea. In that case, right, like he thinks she's cute, therefore like he's propagating the idea, and therefore mimetically you or I therefore latch onto it. So I think there's something to that. And so correspondingly, sorry, Anacostia is not a grid layout, so always takes way more brain power. But conceptual, right? So, and you can kind of see the social proof, right? You see people like Jack Antonoff's entire existence is proof of what I'm saying, of the social element to attractiveness. Of course, there's that funny photo of Jack Antonoff with Margaret Qualley, where she's sitting on his lap, and Jack, he literally looks like a Make-A-Wish kid. But he's got, you know, Margaret Qualley in his lap. So, right. Man dying of thirst complains about, or what? Yeah, some people drown, some guys drown, some people die of thirst. I'm a Primo Brands shareholder. Make of that what you will. Me and my monastic lifestyle. But like, look, like Jack Antonoff, like his name is literally Jack Antonoff. Like, high school could not have been fun for him, but yet apparently it's so random. It just shows how like the zip codes actually matter. There's like zip code determinism, but like, right? But like, unironically, Jack, he dated Scarlett Johansson, or whatever her real name is, back in high school, I think. And then like Lord and Mark Qualley, and I'm sure others, like, there's social proof right there. So now that we've established, There's a joke somewhere. Can't tell if that's alcohol or not. But there's a joke somewhere. There's a joke embedded somewhere in that. So, to bring it back to me, of course, because that's what I'm here to do. And so I think about, how could I, in what scenarios could I have established the mimetic social proof? And not a lot comes to mind, if I'm being honest. Not a lot comes to mind about being able to have a social proof. The one thing that comes to mind is probably like in middle school, like it turns out, yeah, but it is bad. It is bad if your brain goes to, middle school as the counterfactual. So, but yeah, it's kind of like the hardest. It's like the cold start problem. The hardest one is the first one. That's not like I've dated one girl. One lucky gal I've wasted a couple months of her life. A decade ago. Fuck me, that's horrible. Let that sink in, right? To use the Elon joke, right? Let that sink in. Christ, man. Oh, is it closed because of the shutdown? Maybe. Frederick, yeah. Okay, I know he's not doing anything. Since I'm not gonna go into details on that, but yeah, it is like a cold start problem. Presumably, like if you showed a social proof, that helps makes things a bit easier going forward. Or at least it's like the same way like any business, right? Trying to sell a product, right? Like nobody wants to be first per se, right? But like once you have logos and you have a proof of concept for the product, then like, okay, yeah, we'll rock with it, Yeah, and well, since I'm not going to buy that Andreessen Horowitz guy's cold start problem book, I'm kind of chopped, ain't I? Right. Now, chop is actually quite a... it is a pretty good word. Pretty charming. Chopped. He's chopped. I'm chopped. Pans camera. Anyways, so it is a bit ironic. I have my whole "eat less, you fat fuck" calendar invite line. But at the same time, the reason I'm in fucking Anacostia instead of, good old Chevy Chase is because I've been reminded of Costco and the food court, and it is nice to get a $3 milkshake. I might be saying, David, how is a milkshake part of eating less, you fat fuck? Now you'd be correct, and you are correct, but the cop ran to the stop sign. But then, so you'd be right about that. The difference, however, is that I simply account for calories differently, and it forces me to go down to Crystal City to go to the Costco, and therefore kind of nets out in effect. Or at the very least, yeah, there is some happiness that should be deserved in the milkshake. The milkshake isn't not one of those joys in life that a single 23-year-old can't avail himself of. I shouldn't reward myself by moving into an apartment where I can actually see a sunrise. But I get the second derivative of a sunrise. I can see the rays of light bounce into the gutter that then deflects into my window. And second derivatives aren't bad, right? L'Hopital's rule or something like that. So, I'm not deserving of that with my self-loathing, but a milkshake, we can do a milkshake. Some self-loathing. I ran a mile this morning to get to the subway. It is fun to use a dating app after running a mile, because you run a mile, so maybe it's the endorphins, but it could also just be you've done something physical, and now it feels like almost as if you are you are more viable as some girl could take a flyer on, or make as the joke is, right, make a horrible mistaken judgment. But people make plenty of mistakes in judgment, man. That's literally the entire, or 60% of the gambling industry. Which again, as a Caesar shareholder, I kind of need people to keep on doing. I'm kind of looking at Caesar's debt load. And the debt load is high, and the equity value's gone lower, materially lower. Maybe we're in trouble in Caesar's. Nah. I want me some embedded leverage. Let's go. And last night I was listening to the Robinhood earnings call because I like hearing my Romanian friend Vlad. 2021 Wall Street bets. That was a glorious time with GameStop. I'm just a boy from Romania. Much simpler. Anyway, so Vlad has actually managed, presumably it's always been on that trajectory, right, of building a real business, a real financial brokerage, and broader financial services company, which frankly, A, the market is telling you they're doing, and B, you can see it in the product suite. Robinhood Gold, the IRA 3% bonus, the 3% credit card for $60 a year, that is legitimate value prop. But frankly, as a consumer, as long as your IRA deposit, and therefore your 3% match, is greater than the Robinhood Gold membership fee, that is as NPV positive as it gets. Frankly, it's more surprising that subscriber group hasn't gone off the roof, as I learned in losing money in a prediction market on Robinhood Gold subscribers. So now all of this is to get into a nice little tangent on prediction markets. No worries about not getting our... It has been a while since I ranted about that. But on the earnings call, someone pointed out, okay, this is a nice little Main Street. Less strange how everybody subway is much more janky. You would think in most other parts of DC, development works the other way, like around Navy Yard, right? or waterfront. Area waterfront's really nice, and then you have the shitty part. But you know, do what you can, do what you will. But on the earnings call, there's a question about prediction markets and if Robinhood would be interested in pursuing a direct prediction market product offering. And Vlad's answer, which is actually the right answer, I think, is no. We have distribution for 16 million, maybe 60 million, whatever, users. And since we have distribution, there is no need dog, oh my gosh, my video is gonna get taken down now. How's that, the music? But his point was, no, we don't need to build a prediction market ourselves because we have distribution. And because we have distribution, like, look at, there's a Waymo. Waymo right there. But his point was, oh crap. No, we don't need to because we have distribution. Waymo in DC, that'd be. It's actually strategically side tangents and side tangents. That actually makes a lot of sense because a lot of politicians are here, and politicians get to try Waymo. And they see the product. No, I haven't tried it. Again, I was in SF, but I didn't try it. So, again, walking 50K steps in a day. 400 steps. Not bad, not bad. What's actually, again, to degree which you need some je ne sais quoi political savviness. Bringing your product to DC. So you let the politicians now ultimately regulate it. You know, there's a low cunning to whatever Google nerds are behind this thing. Behind this little project. You know, maybe these guys, maybe they do know what they're doing. Ever so slightly. Although, yeah. I don't know, but some DC teenager twat is gonna ride his bike in front of one and get hit. And then that'll be a nice little media circus. But you know, things to go to bad, you know. But so Vlad, so we don't need to do anything in-house because we can just be the distribution channel. By being the distribution channel, crap. Unironically, in some parts of some cities, like you actually do need to worry about pit bulls. Like in Philadelphia, that you actually, in some parts, you actually do. So, man, hearing dog barks in less populated areas, that does trigger the brain a little bit. Yeah, we're just walking. I'm just killing time until the food court opens. Which is kind of a fat thing to say. That is very fat coded. Yeah. But future me appreciates it, of course. I say with tremendous self-loathing. Customary. Trademark. But so pretty much, if Robinhood has the distribution, then Robinhood can partner with multiple people, multiple DCMs, as the CFTC would say. And that way, Robinhood can drive fees down. It could partner with Kalshi, presumably Polymarket at some point. When Polymarket goes live in the US, there's a couple other startups bouncing around for prediction markets, right? So pretty much, Robinhood is in a very cheeky spot. I am inclined to agree, right? Especially if you do buy the Robinhood one-stop financial services argument. Because if that's the case, if you already have your brokerage and you have your retirement and you have your savings account at Kalshi then, or at Robinhood, then using prediction market stuff is much easier on Robinhood than it would be on Kalshi or Polymarket. And if the big difference between Kalshi, Polymarket versus Robinhood is because on the actual Kalshi or Polymarket platforms, you have access to more markets. Well, that's a very solvable issue, right? If Robinhood just expanded its product offering. And there's no reason for Kalshi Polymarket not to expand the product offering, because A, the other guy might, and B, so for Kalshi, it's all a transaction fee game, right? You want volume, and if Robinhood has the distribution to people who will generate volume for you, gung ho, let's go, let's ride, as some college football guy said. So that is the competitive logic of Robinhood. And all I can say is, with my 3 shares down at $12, way back when Robinhood, it wasn't trading below book, but it was trading at 1.5 times book. And it didn't take a whole lot of thinking to realize that for any of these, like A, it has scale. You can compare its user count to other brokerages. And it's not the same as Schwab, right? But there is some scale. You can see the average account balance, and presumably just give it inertia, or the upward pull, account balance should go up. So this account level economics should improve over time. So again, you can cut. Again, it's not great for your long-term growth trajectory, but you could, if you want to. You could get really fit if you wanted to. So to my little pea brain, it's not below book like my favorite, all of my many European and Asian banks. I don't own any African banks. I'm not sure why. Suppose there's no ADR, and I'm not so degenerate to be trying to use interactive brokers to buy on the Johannesburg exchange. Oh, these are vacant, eh? I'm sure at some point Anacostia will be hip and trendy. So anyways, I am bought into the Robinhood bull thesis, setting valuation aside. But the end state, again, I don't say I'm happy that at work I'm intentional enough to not say a lot. However, in these videos, I do say it a lot as a filler word, which I do find a bit annoying. I try not to do. So apologies, future me. So the end state for Robinhood, I think, is quite compelling. And I think it is hard to argue against. because it really does have the mind share. And again, anecdotes, gotta be wary. But you compare the Robinhood app to other brokerage apps, there is a difference. Now, I think the other apps are optimizing for different things that they should be optimizing for, because Robinhood app does have some limitations, some big limitations if we're being frank. But for just buying, if I want to buy D-Wave and IonQ to fuck with Martin Shkreli, hell yeah, brother, we can do that. So, that's how it. But yeah, like having the mind share. Excuse me, but having. I don't know what four-letter word I just said, but having the mind share, having actually an integrated product suite. I do think what Robinhood is saying about having like a platform for your entire family, I do think that is actually different. Now, Fidelity has its kids product, but I don't think they're going about it in as integrated and as one platform a sense as Robinhood's trying to do it. So I do think that is actually a source, maybe not edge, but differentiation in the long term. Now that's very long term, because that's effectively a bet on family formation from your current cohort of 20 to 30-year-olds. And then you need to wait X years for those degenerates to get married. Again, fuck me, those guys are get having some more success, than yours truly. Again, fuck me. But so you need to wait for your current cohort to start forming families. So whatever implicit bet on marriage rates you want to make, have at it. If everything's a derivative of U.S. mortgage rates, then to some degree everything is also a derivative on U.S. family formation and the standards of contemporary American women and men and their dating standards. Maybe that gives you pause. Maybe you should not be very bearish on. Yeah, that does make sense though, right? Because if the entire function of a mortgage is to buy a house, why would you buy a house? Presumably, generally, if you have a family. So, again, I'm butchering the idea that everything is ultimately based off U.S. mortgage rates. I think Patrick McKenzie, Patio 11, made the point. I can't remember which of his articles, but I think it makes sense, right? Because mortgage-backed securities are so large in investable products. So I don't think you can argue with this thesis. But what is the underlying driver of mortgages, or at least prime, Fannie and Freddie mortgages? Demand for houses. Why have demand for houses? Because of having kids. Because in the U.S., apartments are not designed for families because of the GFC, where after GFC, apartments were built to have roommates, which are not conducive for having kids, right? So I'm stealing this from a Works in Progress article, or maybe Statecraft. But one of those two had an article about why apartments are not family friendly, whereas in other countries they are. And it's literally just because of like many things, the GFC. Literally, because of changing preferences to be more affordable, right? With roommates, you need to optimize for like, so you have roommates, right? You want to have equal rooms, common area. But if you're a family, the baby doesn't need the same size room you do, right? But that creates a little conundrum. So if you are trying to use that unit built for roommates to have your family. But if mortgages depend on home demand, and there's less family demand, family formation, and you look at Match Group stock, I suppose grinder stock is is immaterial to this analysis. Hoorah. Huzzah. And then interesting conundrum, I say. As we see here in Anacostia, you know, a little bit of prime real estate for somebody, if they so choose. It's not bad. I do suppose it being fall, and so the leaves do make it look nicer. I'm 90% sure that the camera, the DJI Pocket 3, DJI Osmo Pocket 3, I'm 90% sure for some reason it makes the world look brighter and therefore cooler. What's up, bro? I have seen a couple stray cats around here. You don't see stray cats in DC or Maryland. I guess it is it is a quirk. Maybe not, maybe it's this guy. Because if there's this feller. So, how do I get on the housing mortgage tirade? So I think it sounds pretty smart, actually. A, recognizing the significance of MBS to financial markets. B, you know, doing a little cognitive thinking and thinking about second derivatives. And well, what do you know? Second derivative of a mortgage is demand to buy the actual house. Boom. Time to take out some short insurance. But it's funny, once Fannie and Freddie go public, presumably you can do some shenanigans at that point once they're public. But that would be weird. The float's going to be so low, I think. I recall, for some reason, I'm associating 10% float as part of the issuance. And 10%, that sounds like any tech IPO recently. So, but you know, we must. You exist in the financial system that exists. Gosh, what's this one guy was saying? Like, I don't choose the world. I simply react to it. It's like, you know, that's a bit conceptually that is a bit passive. I think there's a bit more agency, especially if you know. But I do agree with the sentiment. And certainly, if you ask me what I was doing during Great Injustice XYZ, can't say I was making principled stands for my conscience, but history judges me all the same. And our collective responsibility. Look at that nice little apartment building, surrounded by, you know, reasonably dense single-family housing. Now this is, and of course, yeah, crappy, unmaintained yard. Now this is DMV urbanism right here, buckos. This is what I'm talking about. Again, says the guy living in a basement where he can't see a sunrise. I probably won't for at least 2 more years. Oh, Christ. It is funny when I mention that because of the rules, which is fair. Because you are in close proximity to other people. Like, you can't have guests over, you can't have people overnight. And it's like the presumptive right is like, you can't have coitus is kind of like the implication. And so it's funny when like like the can't have guests come over part. It's like there's certain question. It's like, again, saying like a lot, but it's kind of, there are certain questions you can ask people, or the questions that you ask people, but you already know the answer, and so you're just trying to take the piss out of the other guy. There are some questions like that. I am guilty of asking people those questions on occasion because I do want to bust their balls. Now some of them are like, you a virgin, boss? Does your PA compound at 4.7%, boss? Well, fuck me, man. Yes, it did compound at 4.7%, or annualize at 4.7%. So anyways, and so, or sometimes the lack of a follow-up question. Yeah, this did not go. The line of thinking did not go one would think. Yeah, I kind of butchered that. Oh my gosh. I'm a guy. I should not be